A love torn by time. Jimin wakes in the future, Jungkook breaks in the past, and every second becomes a wound that refuses to heal. Don't come looking for me, Jimin whispered into the humming machine, blood dripping from his fingers onto the glass, because if you do, time will kill you before I ever could. The siren wailed like a dying animal as the chamber door slammed shut, light exploding in violent pulses that burned Jimin's vision white. His heart hammered against his ribs, each beat echoing the same impossible truth. Jungkook was crying somewhere in a past that Jimin had already lost. The air smelled of ozone and metal, sharp and bitter, and when the machine finally went silent, the world he knew was gone. Jimin woke choking on breath that didn't feel like his own. The ceiling above him was unfamiliar, sleek, seamless, glowing faintly with lines of cold blue light. His hands trembled as he pressed them to his chest, half expecting the wound to still be there. It wasn't. No blood. No pain. Only a hollow ache spreading slowly beneath his sternum, as if something essential had been carved out and replaced with time itself. Outside the window, the city stretched taller and colder than memory. Towers pierced the clouds, their surfaces alive with moving text and light. Flying vehicles whispered through the air like distant insects. The future. He had made it. And Jungkook, Jimin squeezed his eyes shut. Jungkook was still behind, trapped in a yesterday that would soon learn how cruel time could be. Hours earlier, years earlier, depending on which side of the fracture one stood, Jungkook stood alone in a rain-soaked alley, his hands shaking as he stared at the message glowing on his cracked phone screen. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Live well, even without me. The words blurred as rain mixed with tears. Jungkook's chest hitched, a broken sound tearing out of him before he could stop it. He pressed his forehead against the cold brick wall, breath fogging the air. Jimin never said goodbye like that. Jimin never ran. Fear crawled up Jungkook's spine, whispering that something was wrong in a way love alone couldn't fix. Jungkook had always been afraid of being left behind. It was an old fear, rooted deep in nights when promises dissolved by morning. With Jimin, that fear had quieted. Not vanished, but softened, wrapped in shared routines and small, sacred habits. Jimin humming while brushing his teeth, Jungkook counting Jimin's breaths when insomnia struck, both of them pretending the future wasn't something to fear. Now, standing soaked and shaking, Jungkook realized how fragile that peace had been. He wiped his face roughly and pushed away from the wall. Somewhere in this city, Jimin had vanished. And Jungkook, despite the voice in his head screaming to stop, knew he would follow in the future. Jimin learned the cost of survival. They found him within minutes. Men and women in dark uniforms, their eyes sharp with practiced suspicion, surrounded him as he stumbled out into the street. Their weapons hummed softly, a warning more than a threat. You're out of time, one of them said, voice distorted through a mask. Jimin laughed, the sound brittle and almost hysterical. I know. They brought him to a facility buried beneath layers of glass and steel. As he walked, Jimin noticed how people stared, some with curiosity, others with something like pity. He felt wrong here, like a ghost wearing borrowed skin. When they finally left him alone in a stark white room, the silence pressed down until his thoughts screamed. He remembered why he had done this. The night before the jump, Jungkook had fallen asleep with his head on Jimin's chest, fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt. Jimin had stared at the ceiling, heart racing, replaying the words he wasn't allowed to say out loud. He had seen the projections, the outcomes mapped in cold data. If Jungkook stayed, he would die. Not maybe. Not someday. Soon. Love, in this timeline, was lethal. Jimin's greatest fear wasn't dying. It was watching Jungkook die because of him. So he ran. Not away from love, but straight through time, bleeding and terrified and desperate enough to believe that distance could be mercied. In the past, Jungkook broke into places he shouldn't have been able to access. Grief sharpened him, turned fear into fuel. He followed rumors of illegal experiments, of people trying to bend time like wire. Every lead felt like tearing open an old wound, but he couldn't stop. Sleep came in fragments, haunted by dreams of Jimin reaching for him through glass, mouth-forming words Jungkook couldn't hear. His hands developed a habit, clenching, unclenching, as if always bracing for loss. He stopped singing. Stopped smiling. Love hollowed him out and left something harder behind. Back in the future, Jimin learned the rules. Time corrected itself. It resisted interference. Every attempt to send a message backward caused fractures, small at first, then catastrophic. People had disappeared. Cities had folded in on themselves. Love, it seemed, was one of the most dangerous variables of all. You can't save him, a scientist told Jimin gently, eyes tired with too much knowledge. And you can't go back. Jimin nodded, because he already knew. At night, alone in his assigned quarters, he pressed his palm against the glass and imagined Jungkook doing the same somewhere under a different sky. He whispered apologies to no one, counted seconds like prayers, and wondered if love was supposed to hurt this much even when it was meant to save weeks past. Or months. Time here was slippery, refusing to behave. One evening, Jimin noticed something wrong in the city below, lights flickering in irregular patterns, alarms echoing too late. A temporal surge rippled through the skyline, visible even to the naked eye in the past. Jungkook felt it as a sudden pressure in his skull, a sharp, blinding pain followed by a voice that wasn't a voice at all. Jimin. He fell to his knees, gasping, heart slamming against his ribs. Tears streamed down his face, not from sadness this time, but from the unbearable certainty that Jimin was alive and suffering somewhere he couldn't reach in the future. Jimin dropped to the floor at the exact same moment, clutching his head as memories that weren't his own flooded in. Jungkook crying. Jungkook calling his name. Love tearing through the walls of time like a scream. They lay on opposite sides of history, breathing each other's pain, finally connected again in the worst way possible. Jimin understood then that time had not betrayed love, love had betrayed time. The connection didn't fade. It burned. Jungkook woke on the floor of an abandoned warehouse, dust sticking to his wet cheeks, his chest heaving as if he had been dragged back from underwater. The echo of Jimin's presence still rang in his skull, sharp and intimate, like a voice whispered directly into his bones. Jimin, he said hoarsely, the name breaking apart in his mouth. Around him, the world felt wrong, too thin, too fragile. The flickering lights overhead buzzed angrily, as if time itself was irritated by what had just happened. Jungkook pushed himself up, hands trembling, and laughed under his breath, a sound edged with disbelief and fury. So that's it, he muttered. You didn't disappear. You broke the world instead. In the future, Jimin staggered down a sterile corridor, barefoot, alarms screaming red across the walls. Scientists shouted behind glass partitions, their faces pale with awe and fear. He shouldn't be able to hear you, one of them snapped. He shouldn't feel you, another whispered. Jimin slammed his palm against the wall, breath ragged. Then explain why he's screaming my name inside my head. Silence fell, thick and heavy. One man finally spoke, voice low and controlled. Because the bond didn't break. It stretched. Jimin's laugh came out sharp, almost cruel. We warned you, he said. Love doesn't follow rules. That night, if night was still a meaningful word, Jimin sat alone, knees drawn to his chest, lights dimmed to mimic something like darkness. The city outside pulsed softly, unaware of the fracture widening beneath it. He pressed his fingers to his temple, focusing, remembering Jungkook's voice, the exact way it cracked when he was angry or scared. And then Jungkook was there. Not physically, but close enough to make Jimin gasp. So you're alive, Jungkook said, his voice echoing inside Jimin's mind, raw and shaking with restrained rage. Congratulations. Do you have any idea what you did to me? Jimin swallowed. I saved you. A bitter laugh. You abandoned me. I chose you, Jimin shot back, eyes burning. I chose you, living over us, dying together. You don't get to decide that alone, Jungkook snapped. You don't get to rip yourself out of my life and call it love. Jimin closed his eyes, tears slipping free despite his effort to stay steady. If you saw what I saw, I don't care what you saw, Jungkook interrupted, his voice rising. All I know is I wake up every day with your ghost in my bed and blood on my hands from fighting a future I don't understand. The words hit harder than any weapon. Jimin felt them lodge deep in his chest, heavy and unmoving. I never wanted you to carry this, he whispered. Too late, Jungkook said. I'm carrying you. Everywhere. Days passed with their minds colliding across decades. The connection was unstable, sometimes crystal clear, sometimes dissolving into pain and static, but it was undeniable. When Jungkook was exhausted, Jimin felt it. When Jimin panicked, Jungkook's hands clenched wherever he was, the scientists noticed. The fractures grew worse. You have to sever it, they told Jimin. Or the timeline collapses. Jimin stared at the monitor, watching the city distort for half a second before snapping back into place. And if I don't? Millions die, the man answered quietly. Including him. Eventually. That night, Jungkook sensed something was wrong. Jimin was distant, his presence flickering like a dying signal. What are you planning? Jungkook demanded. Don't you dare shut me out again. I don't have a choice, Jimin said softly. You always have a choice, Jungkook yelled, voice cracking. You just don't like the ones where you're not the hero. The accusation cut deep. Jimin stood, pacing the room, fingers digging into his arms. You think this is about being a hero? I'm terrified, he snapped. Every second I'm here, I feel you slipping further into danger. Jungkook went quiet, then spoke with devastating calm. I'd rather die with you than live erased by you. The words hung between them, heavy and final. Jimin pressed his forehead to the glass wall, breathing hard. Don't say that. It's the truth, Jungkook replied. And you know it. In the silence that followed, time itself seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the future city flickered again, longer this time, windows warping, sirens rising too late. Jimin opened his eyes, resolve settling in like ice. I won't sever it, he said. I'll rewrite it. Jungkook's breath caught. Jimin, what does that mean? It means, Jimin replied, voice steady despite the fear roaring inside him, if time wants to betray love, then love will tear time apart first. Somewhere between past and future, the fracture widened and something new began to awaken. The moment Jimin made the decision, the future screamed. Glass spiderwebbed across the observation windows as gravity hiccuped, dragging loose objects into the air before slamming them back down. Emergency lights bled red across the corridor, bathing everything in the color of warning and blood. Jimin barely flinched. His pulse was steady now, frighteningly calm, as if fear had finally burned itself out and left only resolve behind. In the past, Jungkook dropped to his knees, palms pressed hard against the floor as a wave of nausea tore through him. Jimin, he gasped, breath shuddering. What did you just do? Jimin closed his eyes and let himself fall fully into the connection. For the first time, he didn't resist the pull. He welcomed it. I chose us, he said. Not the version of us they approved of. The real one. Jungkook laughed weakly, the sound cracked and almost hysterical. You're saying that like it won't destroy everything. It might, Jimin replied. But doing nothing already was. In the future facility, armed guards flooded the hall, weapons raised, eyes wide with something dangerously close to panic. He's destabilizing the anchor, someone shouted. Shut it down, now. Jimin turned to them slowly, his gaze sharp, unrecognizable. You built a machine that cuts lovers in half and you're shocked it's fighting back. One of the scientists stepped forward, voice trembling with anger and fear. You are not special because you love someone. Jimin smiled, small and devastating. No. I'm dangerous because I do. The alarms intensified, sound drilling into bone. The temporal core, once humming with controlled precision, now thrashed like a living thing. Time rippled outward in violent waves. In the past, Jungkook staggered outside, gripping a street lamp as the world around him warped. Cars froze mid-motion, rain hung suspended like glass beads in the air, people's voices stretched into distorted echoes. Oh God, Jungkook whispered. Jimin, stop. This isn't just about us anymore. Jimin's voice softened immediately. I know. That's why I need you to trust me. Silence. Then Jungkook exhaled, slow and shaking. You're asking for blind faith after disappearing from my life. I'm asking you, Jimin said, pain threading every word, because you're the only one who can stop me if I'm wrong. That hit harder than any accusation. Jungkook squeezed his eyes shut, memories crashing over him, the way Jimin used to look at him when he was scared, the way he always reached out even when he didn't know the answer. Damn you, Jungkook murmured. You always do this. Do what? Make me choose you, Jungkook said, voice breaking. Even when it hurts. In the future, a guard lunged forward, trying to restrain Jimin. The moment hands touched his arms, the air detonated. A shockwave threw everyone back, slamming bodies into walls. Jimin stood untouched at the center, eyes blazing with reflected light from 1,000 fractured timelines bleeding into the room. "You can't cage a paradox," he said coldly. Jungkook felt it then, felt Jimin not as a voice but as a presence, vivid and terrifyingly close. The connection deepened violently, dragging Jungkook's consciousness somewhere between seconds. Suddenly, he was standing in the future city. Not physically, but real enough to feel the cold wind against his skin, to smell burning circuits and ozone. Jimin stood a few steps away, staring at him like he might break if he breathed too hard. "You're here," Jimin whispered, disbelief and longing crashing together. Jungkook swallowed hard. "So this is where you ran to?" "I ran so you wouldn't die," Jimin said, "and look at you now," Jungkook snapped, stepping closer. "Playing God, bleeding time dry. Do you even hear yourself?" Jimin flinched. "I hear everything." Jungkook's eyes burned. "Then hear this. I didn't need you to save me. I needed you to stay." The words shattered something fragile and vital between them. Jimin's breath hitched, his composure cracking at last. "I was afraid," he admitted, voice raw. "Not of dying. Of loving you so much it would end the world." Jungkook laughed bitterly. "Congratulations. You might be right." Around them, the city trembled. Buildings flickered between existence and absence, streets overlapping with versions of themselves that never should have been. Time was unraveling, thread by thread. A voice boomed through the air, distorted and furious. "End the link now or everything collapses." Jimin looked past Jungkook, then back into his eyes. "If I let go," he said softly, "you forget me." Jungkook froze. "What? You live," Jimin continued. "You move on. You never know why something always feels missing." Jungkook shook his head violently. "No. Don't you dare decide that for me again. I don't see another way," Jimin whispered. Jungkook grabbed Jimin's collar, pulling him close, their foreheads almost touching. "Listen to me," he said fiercely. "If loving you ends the world, then at least let me remember why it was worth it." Tears slid down Jimin's cheeks, glowing in the fractured light. "You're asking me to doom everything." "I'm asking you," Jungkook said, voice trembling but unbroken, "to stop pretending love is a mistake." Time convulsed around them, the final warning screaming through every layer of reality. Jimin closed his eyes and chose. Time did not shatter the way everyone expected. It screamed, bent, and then folded inward like a collapsing star. Jungkook felt it first. The sensation wasn't pain, it was intimacy taken to a violent extreme, every memory, every fear, every unfinished word between them slamming together at once. He gasped, clutching Jimin as the future city dissolved into blinding white. "Jimin," he shouted. "What did you choose?" Jimin didn't answer immediately. His body was rigid, eyes wide, as if he were watching something only he could see. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled with awe and terror. "I chose the truth," he whispered. "All of it." The white light fractured, reforming into overlapping scenes. Past, future, and things that had never existed bled into one another. Jungkook saw himself running through rain-soaked streets, saw Jimin bleeding in the machine, saw versions of them laughing in a kitchen that had burned down years ago. The air was thick with echoes, words spoken, words swallowed, words that would never be said. "This isn't possible," Jungkook breathed. "You said letting go would erase me." "It would," Jimin said softly. "If time stayed in control." A thunderous crack tore through the sky. Somewhere beyond sight, the scientists were shouting, voices warped and distant. "The paradox is stabilizing." "No, it's not stabilizing, it's choosing." Jungkook turned sharply. "Choosing what?" Jimin looked at him then, really looked at him, like he was memorizing every line of his face. "It's choosing a fixed point," he said. "And it's asking us to define it." Jungkook's chest tightened. "In human language, please." Jimin swallowed. "Time wants a sacrifice. Not a death. A truth it can't rewrite." Before Jungkook could respond, the world lurched again. This time, the future city peeled away completely, leaving them standing in a place Jungkook recognized instantly. Their old apartment, the cracked ceiling. The crooked bookshelf Jimin never fixed. The faint smell of coffee and laundry detergent. It was untouched, frozen in a moment before everything went wrong. Jungkook's breath caught. This is impossible. No, Jimin said, voice thick. This is the moment time keeps circling. The front door creaked open on its own. Another Jungkook stepped inside, past Jungkook, younger, eyes tired but hopeful. Past Jimin followed him, laughing softly, shrugging off his coat. Jungkook stiffened. Are you serious right now? Jimin looked away. This is the night before I left. The younger versions moved through the apartment, unaware of the two men watching them like ghosts. Past Jungkook collapsed onto the couch, pulling past Jimin down with him. You're overthinking again, past Jungkook said. Whatever it is, we'll handle it. Jimin flinched. Jungkook rounded on him. You saw this, he said sharply. You heard him say that and you still left. I saw the outcome, Jimin snapped, pain flashing hot and defensive. I saw you dying in my arms in 5 different timelines. I saw myself surviving every single one. And you decided that was acceptable. Jungkook shot back. Me dying was acceptable as long as you could justify it with numbers. Jimin's composure shattered. No, he yelled, voice echoing violently through the apartment. The younger versions froze, flickering like corrupted footage. What was unacceptable was loving you and knowing it would kill you. Silence crashed down, heavy and suffocating. Jungkook's voice dropped, deadly calm. So you chose a future without my consent. Again. Jimin's shoulders slumped. I thought if I carried the pain alone, it would mean something. Jungkook laughed bitterly. That's not love. That's control dressed up as sacrifice. The words struck harder than any physical blow. Jimin's breath stuttered, his eyes glassy. I didn't trust you to survive me, Jimin whispered. That's the truth time wants. The apartment shook. The younger versions shattered into light, dissolving like ash. A deep, resonant hum filled the air. Time itself seemed to lean closer, listening. Jungkook stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Then here's mine, he said quietly. I would rather live a short life choosing you than an endless one shaped by your fear. Jimin's eyes widened. If you say that, I know, Jungkook interrupted. It anchors the timeline. It makes my death inevitable in at least half of them. Jimin grabbed his wrists desperately. I won't let you do this. You already did, Jungkook replied gently. When you left. The hum grew louder, vibrating through bone and memory. Cracks formed in the air like shattered glass. Jimin shook his head, tears spilling freely now. I can't lose you. Jungkook leaned in until their foreheads touched, their breaths uneven and tangled. You don't lose me, he whispered. You stop owning my fate. For a moment, everything held perfectly still. Then time made its choice. The apartment dissolved, replaced by a vast, endless darkness threaded with light. The presence around them receded, satisfied and cruel. Jungkook felt himself being pulled backward, toward his own era, his own body. Jimin, he said urgently. What happens now? Jimin smiled through tears, heartbreak and relief twisted together. Now, he said softly, you remember everything. The pull intensified. Jungkook reached out instinctively, fingers brushing Jimin's one last time. And you? Jungkook demanded. What happens to you? Jimin's smile wavered. I become the part of time that loved you enough to let go. The darkness tore them apart. Jungkook woke screaming in the rain, lungs burning, memories crashing into place like returning blood to a numb limb. He knew what had been taken from him and what had been given back far in the future. In a city slowly stitching itself together, Jimin stood alone beneath a quiet sky, time finally still around him, knowing the world had survived and knowing love had not. Jungkook didn't accept the silence. Rain hammered the pavement as he staggered to his feet, chest burning, the echo of Jimin's last words still tearing through him. People rushed past him, unaware that the world had almost ended, unaware that time had just stolen someone who loved too fiercely to stay. No, Jungkook whispered, then louder, no, this isn't how it ends. Inside his head, the connection was gone, but the memories were intact. Every timeline, every choice, every version of Jimin who had bled for him. The truth settled in his bones like a second skeleton. Jimin hadn't died. He'd been absorbed, dispersed, folded into the machinery of time itself. And Jungkook refused to let that stand. Days later, Jungkook stood face to face with the people who had started it all. The underground lab buzzed with renewed activity, the machines humming softly as if nothing had happened. Scientists froze when they saw him, recognition flashing across their faces. One of them said quietly. You shouldn't remember. Jungkook smiled, sharp and humorless. Then you shouldn't have touched him. Armed guards stepped closer, hands hovering over their weapons. Jungkook didn't flinch. He leaned forward, eyes burning. Where is he? Jungkook demanded. One woman swallowed hard. He's not anywhere. Jimin became a temporal stabilizer. A living constant. You can't retrieve him without undoing everything he sacrificed. Jungkook slammed his fist onto the metal table, the sound echoing violently. He didn't consent to becoming your solution. He chose it, another voice snapped. Jungkook turned slowly, fury coiling tight. No. He was cornered. The room fell into tense silence. Screens flickered behind them, displaying timelines smoothed and repaired, cities intact, disasters erased. He's conscious, Jungkook said suddenly. The woman stiffened. What? He's still aware, Jungkook pressed. I can feel it. You didn't erase him, you imprisoned him. Her expression cracked. If he wakes fully, the paradox could reignite. Jungkook straightened, resolve hardening into something dangerous. Then wake him. They locked him in a containment room, thick glass separating him from the core. Jungkook pressed his palm against the barrier, eyes closing as he focused on the faintest pull deep inside his chest. Jimin, he whispered. You don't get to disappear on me again. The air vibrated. In the future, outside of time, Jimin felt it like a hand reaching into the dark. He was everywhere and nowhere, stretched thin across seconds and centuries, his thoughts looping endlessly. Jungkook. The name anchored him. Jimin gasped, consciousness slamming back into focus. Pain lanced through him as awareness sharpened, timelines snapping into alignment around his presence. No, he breathed. Jungkook, stop. But Jungkook's voice cut through the void, furious and desperate. I didn't agree to lose you. Time convulsed. Alarms screamed in the lab as the core surged violently. His destabilizing, someone shouted, his waking the constant. Jimin felt himself being pulled, compressed back into something human, something fragile. The cost slammed into him instantly, agony ripping through his senses as time resisted. Let me go, Jimin begged, his voice breaking across eras. This is the only way the world survives. Jungkook slammed his forehead against the glass, tears streaking down his face. I survived because of you, he shouted. And now you want me to live knowing you're trapped forever? That's not mercy, that's torture. Jimin cried out as his form began to manifest, light condensing into flesh, knees buckling as gravity reclaimed him. The moment he collapsed onto the lab floor, the machines howled in protest. There he is, someone yelled. Shut it down, now. Jungkook was already moving. The glass shattered under emergency release as he ran to Jimin's side, catching him before he hit the ground again. Jimin was burning hot, body trembling violently, breath shallow and ragged. You idiot, Jimin whispered weakly, fingers clutching Jungkook's shirt. You broke the balance. Jungkook laughed through tears, pulling him closer. You taught me how. Guards rushed forward, shouting orders, weapons raised. Separate them. If they stay connected. Jungkook turned, eyes wild and defiant. Touch him and I swear I'll burn this timeline down myself. Time shuddered around them, reacting to his words like a living thing. Jimin lifted his head slowly, pain etched into every line of his face. They're right, he said hoarsely. If I stay, the fractures come back. Jungkook shook his head fiercely. Then we find another way. There is no other way, Jimin said, voice breaking. I am the lock. Jungkook pressed his forehead to Jimin's, breathing shaking. Then let me be the key. The room fell deathly silent. Even time seemed to pause, listening. Jimin stared at him, something dangerous and hopeful flickering in his eyes. If you anchor me, he whispered, you share the burden. You'll feel every shift. Every loss. You could lose yourself. Jungkook smiled, small and fierce. I already did. When you left. Jimin's hands trembled as they cupped Jungkook's face. This isn't love if it destroys you. Jungkook kissed his forehead, his cheeks, his tears. It's love because it doesn't abandon. The machines screamed as Jungkook pulled Jimin fully into his arms. Time fractured and then, impossibly, held. The core stabilized, not around one constant, but two entwined, defiant, burning brighter together than apart. The scientists stared in stunned silence as the readings flattened, steady and strong. Holding, someone whispered. They're balancing it. Jimin sagged against Jungkook, breath evening out slowly. You're unbelievable, he murmured. Jungkook laughed softly, exhausted and shaking. You're welcome. Outside, the rain stopped. The city breathed on, unaware of how close it had come to ending, and for the first time since time betrayed love, love stood its ground and refused to be erased. Time did not forgive them for surviving, it tolerated them. Jimin woke with Jungkook's heartbeat thudding against his ear, steady but too loud, as if reality itself was monitoring every breath they took. The lab ceiling above them flickered between sterile white and something older, cracked, almost rotten. His body felt heavy, painfully solid, like time had stuffed him back into flesh that no longer fit. You're awake, Jungkook said hoarsely, arms tightening around him as if afraid Jimin might dissolve again. Don't you dare disappear. Jimin winced, a sharp pain slicing through his skull. You're holding me like I'm already dead. Jungkook let out a shaky laugh. You scared the hell out of me. Again. Before Jimin could reply, the room trembled. Not violently, deliberately. The machines didn't scream this time. They hummed, low and ominous, screens flooding with red warnings that no one dared to silence. One of the scientists stepped forward, face pale, eyes locked on the data. This isn't stabilization, she said quietly. It's containment. Jungkook looked up sharply. Explain. She swallowed. Time is allowing you to exist together because you're useful. You're acting like a living seal. But if either of you breaks emotionally, psychologically, the fractures will return. Worse. Jimin laughed weakly. So we're emotional hostages. Another scientist snapped. Your weapons. The word hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Jungkook stood slowly, positioning himself in front of Jimin without even thinking about it. Say that again. You are anomalies, the man continued, voice shaking but resolute. Two people so entangled that time itself bent instead of breaking you. Governments will kill for that kind of leverage. Jimin's fingers curled into Jungkook's sleeve. He could feel it now, the pull, the pressure, the constant awareness of time flowing through him like a second bloodstream. Every lie in the room tasted metallic. Every raised voice sent a tremor through reality. They're right, Jimin murmured. I can feel it. If we fight, if we panic. The lights flickered violently. Jungkook cursed under his breath, immediately pulling Jimin closer. Hey. No. Don't spiral. Look at me. Jimin met his eyes, pupils blown wide. This is what I was afraid of. Loving you isn't just dangerous anymore. It's regulated. Jungkook's jaw clenched. Then let them try to regulate us. They didn't get the chance. The facility shook as explosions thundered from above. Alarms wailed, deeper and more frantic than before. Red emergency lights bathed the room in blood. They're breaching the upper levels, someone screamed. Multiple factions armed. This is a coordinated attack. Jimin sucked in a sharp breath. They came for us. Jungkook's voice dropped to something feral. Of course they did. Gunfire echoed down the corridor. Glass shattered. Time hiccuped violently, freezing a falling shard mid-air before letting it crash to the floor seconds later. Jimin doubled over, choking. I can't, there's too many disturbances at once. Jungkook grabbed his face, forcing him to look up. Stay with me. Don't you dare go back to being everywhere. Stay here. With me. Footsteps pounded closer. A blast blew the door off its hinges. Armed figures flooded in, weapons raised, faces hidden behind tactical masks. Assets secured, one of them barked. Take the constant. Jimin felt it before it happened, a sharp tug, like hooks sinking into his spine. Time screamed inside his skull, no. Jungkook roared, lunging forward. The moment Jungkook crossed the threshold between them, time exploded outward. The attackers froze mid-step, suspended like mannequins in a broken store display. Bullets hung in the air, trembling. Jungkook stood shaking, chest heaving. I warned you, he said quietly. Don't touch him. Jimin stared at him in shock. You did that. Jungkook looked at his own hands, fingers trembling. I felt you pull and I pulled back. The walls cracked, the scientists screamed in horror. This is exactly what we feared. If his emotional response spikes, Jimin grabbed Jungkook's wrist. You're becoming part of the mechanism. Jungkook met his gaze, eyes fierce and terrified. Then stop pushing me out of it. For a moment, the world balanced on a knife's edge, then one of the frozen soldiers screamed. Time snapped violently back into motion. Chaos erupted. Gunfire. Shouting. Alarms. Jungkook dragged Jimin through the collapsing corridor, explosions chasing them as the building began to fold in on itself, layers of time overlapping like broken mirrors. Doors led to places that shouldn't exist. Hallways repeated. The air smelled like burning metal and rain that hadn't fallen yet. Jungkook shouted. That hallway doesn't exist anymore. Jimin yelled back. It's a dead future. They burst through a door just as the floor behind them vanished into nothing. They collapsed into a stairwell, gasping, shaking, bodies pressed together. For a moment, there was only breath and pounding hearts. Jungkook laughed hysterically. So this is our life now? Running from time and everyone who wants to own us? Jimin rested his forehead against Jungkook's, eyes glassy. I tried to save you by leaving. Jungkook kissed his temple, rough and desperate. And I saved you by refusing. A distant rumble echoed, time adjusting, tightening its grip. Jimin closed his eyes. They'll never stop coming. Jungkook's voice was steady, dangerous. Then we stop being easy to find. Jimin opened his eyes slowly. You're talking about disappearing. I'm talking about choosing ourselves, Jungkook replied. Outside their rules. Outside clean timelines. Jimin swallowed hard. If we do that, we won't be heroes. We'll be disasters. Jungkook smiled grimly. We already are. Somewhere deep in the broken future, time shuddered again, not in anger this time, but in anticipation, because the two people who had once begged it for mercy were no longer asking. They stopped running when the world finally ran out of places to break. The edge of what used to be a coastline, where the sea shimmered between versions of itself, sometimes calm, sometimes burning, sometimes already gone. Jimin and Jungkook stood hand in hand, breath fogging the unstable air. The sky above them was wrong, stitched together from overlapping sunsets and unfinished dawns. Time had followed them here, not as an enemy anymore, but as a wounded thing deciding whether to heal or collapse. Jimin's knees buckled without warning. Jungkook caught him instantly, arms tightening, heart slamming hard enough to hurt. It's getting worse, Jimin whispered, voice trembling. I can feel the strain. Every second we stay like this, we pull harder on the seams. Jungkook pressed his forehead against Jimin's, eyes burning. Then tell me what you're not saying. Jimin laughed softly, broken. You always know. Say it anyway. Jimin took a shaky breath. This balance, it's temporary. Time isn't angry anymore, but it's tired. It doesn't want to carry us forever. Jungkook's grip tightened. So what does it want? Jimin looked at the horizon, where waves froze and restarted over and over again. A decision that doesn't contradict itself. Jungkook went still. You mean I can't be the constant, Jimin said quietly. And you can't be the anchor. Not together. Silence fell between them, heavy and absolute. Jungkook pulled back just enough to look at Jimin's face, memorizing it like a man about to lose gravity. No, he said immediately. We didn't come this far just to accept another version of goodbye. This one is different, Jimin replied, tears sliding freely now. This time, I'm not running. And I'm not deciding for you. Jungkook laughed, sharp and aching. You're still asking me to let you go. I'm asking you, Jimin said, voice shaking, to let me stay without tearing the world apart. Time shifted around them, the air humming low, listening. Jungkook turned away, jaw clenched, breathing hard. Every instinct in him screamed to fight, to burn the universe down before he lost Jimin again. But beneath the fury, there was something else now, understanding, cruel and clear. If you leave, Jungkook said hoarsely, where do you go? Jimin smiled sadly. Not into time. Not into nothing. I step out of the equation. Jungkook looked back at him sharply. Explain. I become ordinary, Jimin said. No paradox. No constant. Just a life that never touched the machine. A version of me that never met you. The words hit like a gunshot. Jungkook staggered back. You're saying you erase yourself. I rewrite myself, Jimin corrected gently. So you don't have to carry me as a wound. Jungkook shook his head violently. I don't want a world where you don't exist. Jimin reached up, cupping Jungkook's face with trembling hands. You'll exist in it. Whole. Free. Able to choose love without consequences written in physics. And you? Jungkook demanded. What do you get? Jimin's smile broke. Peace. The sky darkened. The sea stilled. Time leaned closer than it ever had, not threatening now, waiting. Jungkook pressed his hands over Jimin's, breathing uneven. If you do this, he whispered, I won't remember you, will I? Jimin swallowed hard. Not consciously. Jungkook let out a broken laugh. That figures. He stepped forward suddenly and kissed Jimin, not gentle, not restrained, but desperate and burning, like trying to carve memory into bone. Time trembled but did not interfere when they pulled apart. Jungkook rested his forehead against Jimin's. Then do me one last favor, he murmured. Make it hurt less than before. Jimin closed his eyes. I can't promise that. But you can promise it ends, Jungkook said. Jimin nodded, tears falling. I promise. Time surged, not violently, not cruelly, but with finality. Light wrapped around Jimin, warm and quiet. His grip loosened slowly, reluctantly, fingers sliding from Jungkook's hand like the last second of a dream. Live well, Jimin whispered, smiling through tears. Even without me. Jungkook opened his mouth to scream his name and the world blinked. The sky was blue. The sea was calm. The coastline was whole. Jungkook stood alone, heart racing, chest tight for reasons he couldn't explain. He pressed a hand to his sternum, breath catching, eyes inexplicably wet. Something was missing. He didn't know what. He only knew that sometimes, at night, he dreamed of a man with gentle eyes and impossible courage, standing in broken light and choosing love over time itself. And somewhere, in a quiet ordinary life that never touched a machine, Jimin paused one afternoon for no reason at all, hand pressed to his chest, heart aching with a feeling he could never name. Time moved forward, love did too.